Okay, so if we look at this next example, it says determine the value of A and B or X and Y, whatever variation of variables so that it is a parallelogram. So what we're essentially doing, all right, is we are kind of assuming that it's a parallelogram. So we're thinking, well, what do we want it to be in order for it to be a parallelogram? Okay, so if we look at this first one, I'm going to look at my 7X and my 56. And I'm saying if I want this to be a parallelogram, then what do I need to do with those angles? Well, I need to make them congruent. So I'm going to set 7x equal to 56, which means that x is equal to 8. And then same idea. All right, I'm going to take the 4y plus 4 and the 5y minus 26, set those equal to each other. What is it? 5y minus 26. All right, solve. I'm going to get negative 1. Y equals negative 30. All right, divide out the negative 1. Y is equal to 30. Okay, now I'm not going to do this next example because it's very similar to it. All right, you would essentially just set these two equal to one another. Then you'd set the 4y minus 9 and the 2y plus 5 equal to one another. All right, so it's the same kind of idea. But I am going to do this one right here. So I like this question because we're going to have to do some systems of equations. So it's the same type of setup as what we did up here. All right, the difference is, though, is I'm going to have to manipulate two different variables. So if I look at my picture, all right, I want to set my opposite angles as congruent. So I'm going to set B equal to 15A. And the problem is I can't do anything with that, right? Because I have two different variables. So I have to set up a second equation. So then now what I'm going to look at are these two angles right here. And what I know is if I want this to be a parallelogram, then the consecutive angles have to be supplementary. So I'm going to add 6A plus B plus 15A. Actually, no, I'm instead going to make this a little bit easier. You could do it that way. All right, I'm actually going to look at these two angles, 6A plus B and that B. And it's the same kind of conversation, all right, where I'm going to set those two, add them up, set them equal to 180. So I'm going to do plus B is equal to 180. So I'm going to get 6A plus 2B equals 180. All right, and it's not looking very hot, but what I know is that B is equal to 15A. So I'm going to take that 15A and I'm going to plug it into that B right there, right? So I'm going to have 6A plus 2 times 15A equals 180. I'm going to get 6A plus 30A equals 180, which gives me 36A equals 180. All right, which means that if I take that 180 divided by 36, I get 5. So I know A is equal to 5. Which means now if I take that A and I plug it in to B equals 15A, I'm going to have B is equal to 15 times 5, which means that B is equal to 75. And those are my two answers. Now, I just want to come back to this and say you could have also done it by doing the 15A plus the 6A plus B is equal to 180. All right, it would have given you the exact same answer. All right, so actually, I don't know why I chose to do the B. It doesn't actually matter, okay? All right, so then now we're going to get to this next example. And just so you know, in GeoGebra, this A and then the caret and the 2 means A squared. All right, so if you want to write that and cross that out, right, we can. So if this is a parallelogram, or if we're assuming it, or we want it to be a parallelogram, all right, what we know is that E has to be the midpoint, which means that those two segments are equal to one another. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, I'm going to set A squared equal to 5A minus 6. All right, which brings us back to chapter 1 stuff, because we're going to actually have to factor this. And if you remember, when you're solving a quadratic, you have to set that quadratic equal to 0, which means that I'm going to subtract the 5A and I'm going to add the 6 over so that it's all on one side. So I'm going to get A squared minus 5A plus 6 is equal to 0. And I'm going to have to factor this bad boy, all right, which means that I need to find two numbers, and I like to set mine up in this little chart thing, all right? I need to find two numbers that multiply to get a positive 6, but add to get a negative 5. And those two numbers are going to be negative 3 and negative 2, which means that this factors into a minus 3, and then a minus 2 equals 0. So from there, you're going to individually set a minus 3 equal to 0, which means that a is equal to 3. And then you're going to set a minus 2 equal to 0, which means that you get a is equal to 2. And then those two answers are your final answer. So you get a is equal to 3 and a is equal to 2. Okay. All right. Now, I am going to do this next one. And if you notice, we have 3 different coordinate geometries, okay? So here's the deal, all right? For these types of questions, all right, it's telling you which way that you have to prove, all right, that this is a parallelogram, okay? So it's saying determine if the following vertices make up a parallelogram using the slope formula. And so if you think about the 5 different ways that we're trying to prove quadrilaterals as parallelograms, how would the slope formula help us? Well, the slope formula would help us by possibly proving, all right, that that it's a parallelogram by having opposite sides are parallel, all right, which means how many times am I going to have to do the slope formula? Well, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to do it 4 times, all right? You're going to have to do it if I would sketch out this parallelogram as A, B, C, D. You're going to have to find the slope for AB. You're going to have to find the slope for BC. All right, you're going to have to find the slope for CD. And then you're going to have to find the slope for AD. Okay? All right, so the slope formula, as we know, is y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. And the reason why this would be helpful is if we could find that the opposite sides have slopes that are the same, then that would mean that those sides are parallel, okay? So, real quick, I'm going to look to see if I can get my answer key so that we don't have to do this a ton of times, okay? But you would find the slope, all right, for AB, for BC, for CD, and for AD. All right, so let me see if I can find my answer key. Okay, let's see what we got. Section 6.3. All right, good news, guys. Looks like I have it. Okay, all right, so I'm going to tell you guys what the slopes are. All right, so the slope of AB is 1/7. All right, the slope of BC is -6. The slope of CD is 1/7. And the slope of AD is -6. So if you found the slope of all 3 lines, all right, this is exactly what you want to see, because I see that I have these 2 that are the same, all right, which means that side AB is parallel to side CD. And then I also see that BC and AD, all right, have the same slope, which means that BC and AD are parallel. So that means that, yes, all right, this is a parallelogram because we have opposite sides are parallel. Okay, so I'm going to pause here and then come back for the next